What is going on, everyone? It is College Football Talk, and I'm your host, Hunter DeLauder. Today is Week 11 preview. We are going to dive into all the biggest action of the weekend, including some SEC headlining matchups between Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Georgia. Super good one, Vanderbilt, South Carolina. We're going to talk about. Also have a big Big 12 matchup as the crazy Big 12 race continues on with Colorado, Texas Tech. Plus, a lot of non-headlining games, but games we need to keep an eye on because to be looking at Saturday afternoon, you're just kind of cruising around, and all of a sudden you're looking and say, wait a minute, Georgia Tech's beating Miami right now? Like, let me get over and watch that. So I'm going to dive into all of that. Plus, I'm going to give my thoughts on the first playoff rankings that were released last night. I'm going to give my thoughts on that, and I'm going to hand out some best bets. We're going to bounce back in a big way after falling to the wayside last weekend. Still 11 games over 500. So make sure you guys give me one more shot. Just give me one more chance. We're going to bounce back in a big way. Make sure you guys are also subscribing to the podcast. They're racing to 200 subscribers. So the only way to do that is to subscribe on the YouTube and then listen and follow on Spotify as well. If you want to hit me up on the socials, at TheLauderHunter on Twitter /X, and then on Instagram, Hunter.TheLauder83. Make sure you guys are doing that. And without further ado, we will get right into it. So I'm going to kill the music. And we're going to start with the playoff rankings because I think that's the most important right here. So I'm going to put the playoff rankings actually up right now. So if you're looking here, the first playoff rankings were revealed. And obviously you can tell here, I'm actually just going to ditch that. See right there, you can see it. So with the bracket, remember, it's the 4 highest rated Power 5 conference champions or Power Conference champions. That includes the group of 5. So in the event, let's say that Boise State, who right now is the highest ranked group of 5 opponent, is eventually takes over BYU ranking wise, they would take the 4 spot. So something to keep in mind right there. But for right now, so your top 25 ended up being, as you can see, the top 14. So top 25 ended up being Army, Missouri, Clemson at 23, Louisville 22, Washington State 21, Colorado 20, Kansas State 19, Pittsburgh 18, Iowa State 17, Ole Miss 16, and then LSU 15 before we move right back over to the bracket here. 14 is Texas A&M, so they're the second team out. First team out would be SMU at the 13th spot, and then this is where things start to get a little dicey. So remember, Boise State is number 12. They are the highest ranked group of 5 teams, so they right now would be the 12th seed. The only other group of 5 team ranked is Army at 25. Alabama is at 11. They would be at the 11th spot. Notre Dame, 10, likewise. Number 9 is BYU. Now, BYU would be the 4 seed because they are the highest ranked. They're the second highest ranked power champion or conference champion, and they are right now the projected Big 12 winner in a sense. So that's why they would go in the 4 seed. Indiana's at 8, so they would be actually slotted at the 9 spot. Tennessee's at 7, but they would be the 8 spot. This is when it gets a little funky. People just have to remember your ranking isn't necessarily based on what you'd be seeded. Penn State is at 6, so they would be the 7th seed. And because they're the 3rd highest, obviously then you're taking number 6, moving it over, and then follow along here. And then Texas is 5, so they would be the 6th seed. And then you have Miami at 4, which would be the ACC winner, so they'd be at the 3 seed. And then you have Ohio State 2. Now, since Ohio State is the highest ranked non-conference champion, they would be the 5 seed, and essentially that's why. And then everything kind of follows behind that. And then you have Georgia 3, Ohio State 2, Oregon 1. So then Georgia gets slotted at the 2 spot because they would be the conference champion projected right now. And then you have Oregon at 1. So that's pretty much how it goes. And then you kind of take the the conference champions, and then you kind of reseed everyone after that, wherever else everyone's ranked from highest to lowest then. My biggest takeaways would be that Ohio State being ranked over Georgia shows me that the committee favors better losses than wins, because the only reason why I can think Ohio State would be ahead of them is that maybe they played a little bit better consistently wise, but their loss, I guess, would be better because they only lost on 1 point to Oregon at Oregon. They do have the big win against Penn State, but outside of that, they don't really have anything. Georgia, they lost to Alabama, and it wasn't as it ended up being a lot closer, obviously, and they almost won the game. But obviously, you take the first half into consideration there. But Georgia has ranked wins over Clemson. They have ranked wins over Texas. At the time, Texas was number 1 in the country. They also have a decent one against Florida, against Auburn. Well, Auburn's not very good. But then you also have, they have Ole Miss coming up, Tennessee. So I'm not really too worried in that aspect because everything kind of sort itself out. That's why you have to take these grain of salt with these first rankings, because a lot of times, like, everything will just kind of sort itself out. Sometimes it doesn't, and then you still have to kind of debate about it. But a lot of this stuff, majority of it, does get sorted out. My second point, Penn State over Indiana and BYU feels a little insane, only from the aspect that both the Indiana and BYU are undefeated, and Penn State doesn't have any big wins that would tell me that they should be boosted ahead of them. I mean, right now, I want to say, like, Penn State's biggest win is Wisconsin, maybe. I would have to double check their schedule, but really their only big test was Ohio State, and they just lost, and they didn't look very good in it. So where you have BYU has 2 ranked wins, Indiana is undefeated, but they're just bludgeoning teams every week. I mean, to be fair, like, they haven't really played anybody in a sense, like, ranked wins, anything like that, but they're just dominating teams. But I could see a case where BYU could be ranked over Indiana only because of those 2 ranked wins. They have ranked wins against Kansas State, and they have ranked wins against SMU. So both of which are top 20 teams. That's why I would have slotted BYU maybe ahead of Indiana, only from that aspect. But again, everything's going to sort itself out. I wouldn't have to worry about it too much. 2 other things. Missouri still being ranked as criminal, treasonous, crazy. I don't know why they're still ranked. It is baffling to me. I don't know. They're not ranked, thank God, anymore in the AP, but somehow I don't know how the committee's still seeing them. I mean, at this point, their best win's Vanderbilt, which isn't a terrible win. I mean, it's still a nice win, I guess, because Vanderbilt is pretty solid this year. But outside of that, like, 2 road losses, they're 1 and 2 in ranked games this year. Their only win came against Boston College, and that was a 6-point win at home in which they had to come back. The 2 losses were on the road at Bama and A&M, in which they were outscored 75-10 and got bludgeoned in both. So I don't know why they're ranked. They are not anything special. They're a fraudulent 6-2 team. They don't need to be ranked. South Carolina should be ranked. South Carolina not being ranked tells me a lot right there too. South Carolina is 5-3, but probably the best 5-3 team in the country. They are argument to be 7-1 at this point. They got robbed out of the LSU game, and they had a quarterback go down, and they were a couple plays away from beating Alabama. So their only real loss was at home with Ole Miss. But outside of that, like, they've been a very, very solid group, and they should be ranked, and Missouri should not be. That's all I'm going to say. Obviously, there's your rankings this week. Obviously, now going forward, every Tuesday night, they will be announcing the new rankings. So, but again, like, everything's going to sort itself out, so I don't really worry about it too much. All right. That was your playoff talk. So, hope you enjoyed it. We're going to get into what everyone's here for, though, and that is preview. We have a big-time game, 1 of 2 in the SEC, 1 of 3, we could say. But the 2 headlining games, the main events. Number 1 is the one we're going to be talking about. Number 11, Alabama, is at number 15, LSU, Death Valley at night. You don't even need me to tell you anymore about that. You already know that when a Death Valley at night, those words, that phrase, it just means a lot more. You get goosebumps. You just get that feeling. You start hearing that the stadium just sink its teeth into the opponent as they just kind of slowly just take them out, just can take out any confidence, any sort of will to win out, because they know that they're in deep trouble. That's usually what Death Valley at night does. Brian Kelly is undefeated at home in night games, so something to keep in mind. Remember, he did beat Alabama at home 2 years ago, and that was a wild walk-off win. But it's also a game that, we can kind of look back on and pull a few things from that, mainly the penalty aspect, and I'll talk about it here in a second. One of my biggest keys, though, in this game, and which is a game that's like an elimination game for both teams, in my opinion. Which team's going to have more success running the football? That's going to be a big question in this game because you have an LSU team that runs the ball not enough, and then you have an Alabama team that's also a little bit too dependent on their quarterback. They have better success running the football, but they don't do it enough either. So you have an LSU team that's 111th in rushing offense. Caden Durham has done a good job this year settling that backfield down after the John Emery injury at the beginning of the year, but he's been able to kind of take over the reins, but he hasn't been able to, I think, be that like workhorse catalyst that they maybe have been looking for, because Garrett Nussmeier is still throwing the ball way too much. They've been way too dependent on him, and which has led to him being very turnover prone, also taking some unnecessary pressure, maybe not necessarily sacks, but also just pressure, makes things more difficult for him, especially because teams now can play more pass defense. They don't really have to worry about the run. Alabama is 47th in rushing offense, which is a lot better, obviously, but Jam Miller and Justice Haynes still haven't been like that dynamic duo that I thought they would be. Jalen Miller is the second leading rusher on this Alabama team. I didn't include him here because I'm going to talk about him in a second, but they need to run the ball more. They did a lot better running the ball 2 weeks ago, right before they hit their bye with Missouri, where they ran all over the Tigers. But it just feels like whichever team can kind of establish a run game early and often is going to play big dividends, because you can also take that as we're going to keep the other team on the sidelines, because both teams have really good offenses. This is going to be probably a high-scoring affair. I mean, the over-under is 58.5. So whichever team can kind of take that time of possession game, run the ball, keep the other team on the sideline, I think is going to have a good chance to win this game. Both defenses, rushing-wise, are middle of the pack-ish. I would lean LSU's run D a little bit more, although Alabama does have I think you could argue maybe D-line, but I would still lean LSU. My next point is Bama needs to stay disciplined. Both these teams are very undisciplined groups when it comes to penalties per game, penalty yardage, but Bama takes the cake. Bama is 129th in penalties per game. That's not very good by my estimation. I'm not very good at math, but when you are about 9 penalties a game, and let's check 127 the penalty yards per game with about 79, it's not very good. And 2 years ago, I looked when they in this same stadium, they'll be playing that Saturday night, 9 penalties for 92 yards. This is the same Alabama team that has been plagued by penalties and lack of discipline for a good, probably about 3 years now. And if you look back at the Tennessee game, I mean, it was a disaster. And that was an all-time environment. Now you have to go to probably arguably an even better environment that it'll be at. Are they even going to be able to do anything? Or how will they respond? You know what I mean? Like, is it just going to be a disaster and LSU is going to get bailed out a couple times, or just Alabama's going to continue to shoot themselves in the foot the whole time? Well, that could happen, because if LSU or if Bama just decides to just keep taking penalty after penalty, pre-snap penalties are going to be huge to look for. Alabama is terrible when they fall behind. They fall behind the chains instead of being out ahead of the chains. So we're going to have to find out. We're going to find that out. I was talking about staying ahead of the chains or falling behind. Alabama is 132nd in third and long plays. That's 7 yards or more. They're 10th in the nation in third and short plays. So when they stay ahead of schedule, they're very efficient. They're very good offensively. They can move the ball, continue drives. When they shoot themselves in the foot, whether it be penalties, just tackles for loss, just negative plays, they're not very good. Obviously, stats don't lie there. And LSU is not the best third down defense, so it's going to be critical. If Alabama can not shoot themselves in the foot, stay ahead of schedule, they should be okay. I look to them. I'd favor them in that department, because if LSU can't get off the field, it's going to be a long night. And that's something that's going to go hand in hand with also LSU being able to try to contain Milroe. They struggled mightily when it came to containing a high versatile dual threat quarterback. Look at the A&M game last week when You had Marcel Reed running all over the place, and LSU had no answers. Now, I will defend LSU in a sense where maybe they hadn't prepared for Marcel Reed as much as they maybe did with Wegman. But still, you would have had to maybe in the back of your mind been ready for any sort of maybe specialty plays, any sort of packages for Marcel Reed, or just in the event like what happened where he just comes in. I mean, he ran all over LSU. And if you don't think Jalen Milroe can do the same thing, you're out of your mind. Obviously, Jalen Milroe is second leading rusher for Alabama. And that's going to be up to LSU's edge guys with Braden Swinson, Xavion Jones, as well as those high caliber linebackers, Whit Weeks, Greg Penn. Someone's got to be a spy and contain them. You got to look at them almost like what South Carolina did, where they just said, listen, we're going to run straight and we're going to contain the edge. And it did work for most of the game. There was a few times where it broke free, but for the most part, they were able to contain Milroe in one of the better games I've seen. Even Tennessee did a good job. So LSU's got to be able to do that. It's going to go hand in hand with getting off the field, backing up Alabama, getting them in these third and long spots where now you're in pass first situations, and now you're going to have Jalen Milroe say, listen, we're going to take away your running advantage, your running ability, beat us with your arm. Because something's been up with Jalen Milroe lately, and I don't know if it's an injury or just teams are starting to figure him out more, but he hasn't been as lethal throwing the ball down the field as he was to start the year. And so, again, if LSU can get him in spots, get pressure, contain, it's going to be a good night, I think, for LSU then. LSU-wise, Nussmeier's going to have himself a clean and efficient game. Garrett Nussmeier has been very good this year. 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's fifth in passing yards in the country. And the LSU as a whole is sixth in passing offense, which is crazy because they're sixth in passing offense, but 111th in rushing, which obviously, as I was talking about earlier, I mean, they need to run the ball more because you can't be having Nussmeier drop back and throw the ball 40, 50 times a game. It's just going to you're going to lead to more interceptions, more vulnerability, and higher pressure rate, which is going to make Nussmeier more susceptible to turning the football over. And Bama's secondary has been vulnerable for most of the year because they're a young, inexperienced group that has a lot of transfers or freshmen playing, but they're turnover savvy. Alabama's 35th in passing yards allowed, so it's not bad, but they're 18th in interceptions. So they're creating turnovers. They have 11 on the year, and if Nussmeier, who has been a little careless with the football lately, he starts, feeling the pressure a little bit, just making bad decisions. You saw what Carson Beck had trouble with when they played Alabama. I mean, even Tennessee had some dumb mistakes. I mean, Alabama has done that to some quarterbacks that have been high caliber quarterbacks this year, and they will do the same thing with Garrett Nussmeier. And finally, I think Death Valley is going to have to be a massive role in this game. That crowd, that environment, I've been saying it all year with some of these high profile games. These crowds have got to be like that extra 12th person, that 12th man on the field. I keep going back, Eugene, when Oregon hosted Ohio State, when Neyland, when Tennessee beat Alabama. Penn State had a record crowd, but their offense was too lackluster to do anything. But that was an outstanding crowd. South Carolina last weekend, Williams-Brice was alive and well. College Station, when A&M beat LSU, came back and beat them, that place was on fire. There's a video from that A&M game where, the camera is shaking. It feels like the whole stadium is shaking. That's how this environment, LSU at night, has got to be like that. As far as prediction goes, I think LSU has enough to win this one. I like 34-30. I think the crowd is going to play a huge role. I think I trust LSU's passing game a little bit more than I do Bama. I think that the defensively LSU is going to be able to get enough pressure on Jalen Milroe and neutralize him enough to where LSU's just going to have enough plays. They're going to pretty much, it's going to be a net race to the finish. Which team's not going to run out of gas first? And I like LSU in this spot, and which means I like them to cover the number, obviously, and I like them to win outright. All righty, we're moving on here. I'm going to get a drink here. All righty. Number 3, Georgia heading to the SIP, Oxford, Mississippi, to take on the number 16 Ole Miss Rebels. Georgia is a 2.5-point favorite. Over-under right now is at 54.5. The Dogs have just been an up and down, inconsistent type team all year when it comes to offensively wise. And then you have they're coming off a win against Florida where they struggled for better half, 3.5 quarters. Excuse me. But they ended up winning by double digits. But, they just feels off, with the quarterback mistakes, the lack of running game. It just hasn't been Georgia-esque. And then you have Ole Miss coming in that's been kind of playing elimination mode all year after they, you have the Kentucky loss, you have the LSU loss. So they've been kind of playing with a little sense of urgency, a lot more sense of urgency. And they went to Arkansas last week and put nearly 700 total yards of offense. Jackson Dart threw for, I think it was 6 touchdowns. Jordan Watkins had 5 touchdowns himself at the receiver spot. So both teams kind of come in with different vibes. Ole Miss coming in a lot more probably with a lot more optimism, a lot more higher up energy, where you have a Georgia team that's kind of coming in, don't know what to think, don't know what to make about them. However, these two teams did play last year, and it was in Athens, but it was a bludgeoning. Georgia smashed Ole Miss. 52-17, Beck had over 300 yards passing. They ran the ball for over 300 yards. It was just an utter beatdown. And it was really a game for a quarter, and then it wasn't. So it's much different circumstances, obviously, this year than it was last year. But you can't look at that and say, listen, Ole Miss, that game last year drove Ole Miss to be the team they are now. Because after that game last year, Lane Kiffin said, we just don't have the caliber players that Georgia has. And what did he do about it? He went to the portal, and he just believed they finished with the number 1 transfer portal class, which included guys like, Princely Umanmielen, Walter Nolan, Trey Amos. They got Juice Wells. So plus many more. They got a couple guys from Washington from the O-line spot to kind of settle in nicely there. So it's a well-oiled machine right now. They're probably one of the best. They're probably one of the most underrated and best 2-loss teams you'll find in America. As far as the goals or keys for the game for Georgia, the proof's in the pudding right here. Beck's got to have a clean game. He's got to be able to eliminate the turnovers in some way, shape, or form. 17 touchdowns, 11 interceptions this year for Beck. All 11 interceptions have come in the last 5 games. I don't know where or how he just decided to sprinkle that in this season. And he's looking to avoid his 3rd straight game with 3 interceptions. The last 2 games he's thrown for 3 interceptions. I said this in the last episode, he became the first quarterback in the SEC history to win multiple games when throwing at least 3 interceptions. So I guess congrats there, but can't happen. You just continue to put your team in the 8-ball position when you're doing that. And now you're forcing yourself, you got to claw back. You put your defense in a tough spot. And against a team like Ole Miss, you cannot be doing that. Now, Ole Miss is going to be looking to try to do that, obviously, because why not? But if you're back in Georgia's offense, cannot do it. Ole Miss's pass defense stinks. They stink. They're 91st in America in pass defense, 234 yards allowed per game, and they're 72nd in interceptions forced. So they've only created 7 turnovers, interceptions-wise, on the year. So there is room to exploit if you're Beck in the Georgia's passing game. Can it get done, though? Is going to be the ultimate question, because between Beck's poor decision-making lately, the lack of receiver communication between the quarterback, the drops, missed assignments, it's been a mess. And yet, there's a random stat that they're scoring more points when he's turning the football over than they are when he's not turning the football over, which is wild. I have the stat right here. Here we go. Georgia's scoring average in 4 games that Carson Beck has thrown 11 interceptions here, because in between that 5-game spot, last 5 games, but the one game he had no interceptions. So in the 4 games he has the 11 picks in, Georgia's averaging 34.8 points per game. In the games he hasn't thrown an interception yet, 31.5 points per game. So, I mean, as poorly and inconsistent as the pass offense has been, they're still scoring a lot of points. But he can't be turning the football over. Just can't. As far as how do you fix that? Well, what will help it, I don't know if you can fix it overnight, but what can help is establishing a run game, which is going to be tough because Ole Miss is ranked second in the nation in rushing defense. They're going up against a Georgia unit that is 97th in rushing offense. They just have not run the ball enough all year long. It's there, but they just haven't found that secret sauce yet. That big game, that breakout game that you're just running all over the opponent, and they have no answers, whether it be just lack of personnel, just lack of backs. Injuries have been an issue in the running back department for Georgia this year. They do expect Etienne to play this week. He bruised his ribs in the Florida game, but Kirby Smart's confident that he is going to play. Nate Frazier and Cash Jones are going to have to be ready to step up again. I mean, it's there, but you're going to have to be able to run the ball effectively enough, because what Ole Miss is going to want you to do is, they're going to want to try to just shut down the run game and force you to pass, and that's what this offense can't allow happen. Even with Ole Miss's struggles defensively, stopping the pass, they want Georgia, I think, to become that one-dimensional pass-first offense and just kind of forget about the run. Because obviously, if you can do that, then you're going to make Beck more susceptible, kind of like Garrett Nussmeier. You're going to make them more susceptible to turning the football over. Even if Georgia is getting stuffed and there's just no momentum running the football, they're going to have to find a way to keep trying to run the football, whether it be jet sweeps, end arounds, just getting crazy, fancy with it, pitch tosses to the left or right. I don't know what you need to do, but you got to be able to establish a run game of some sort. They ran for over 300 yards, ran for 300 yards against the same team last year. Now, different defensive line, different unit, obviously. And no team has really had success running the football against this. Obviously, Ole Miss is only allowing an average of 82 yards a game. So it's been tough, obviously, but they've got to be able to establish a run game. They cannot go one-dimensional here. I think if you're Georgia, what you maybe even want to do is come out passing first, pass happy, even if it's, extending the run game to the pass game, where it be they love doing these short, quick screens to the left or right. Get guys, keep getting quick yards right there, staying ahead of the chains. 5 to 6 yard screens will be big, especially if you can get it early and often, which is going to help, create those shots down the field. It's going to help out in the running game as well, I think. They need to limit explosive plays defensively if you're Georgia. It's kind of been the story all year with Georgia's secondary, because, you looked at what happened when the Alabama game and how many explosive plays they let up. Well, they've done a better job this year. They gave up the one big one last week on a just poor read by Malachi Starks, where he first 3 steps ran, and from that moment he was done. So they're going to have to be able to limit the explosive plays. This is a very high explosive play type offense. Ole Miss is 7.3 yards per play, is second in the nation, and they have plenty of playmakers, even if they're not healthy right now. Trey Harris is questionable. I know Caden Prescorn, their tight end, missed last week. The injury report should be coming out tonight of recording, so we'll see on the injury report where they are. But, you have Jordan Watkins, who's averaging 22 yards per reception. Trey Harris is averaging 16 yards per reception. Caden Lee, 17.1 yards. Juice Wells, 20.4. Caden Prescorn, 16 yards per reception. What's the common theme here? Reception-wise, averaging per catch, it's going for big yardage. So Georgia's got to be able to keep everything in front. And, even last week, they were down their 2 top safeties because of, 2 or 3 because Starks played, but they were down Aguero and Jackson because of the first half suspension. So they're going to be back this week. Hopefully they're just able to keep everything in front. They got to be able to do that. If they can do that, it's going to help out the defense, because you're not, You're not allowing anything to get behind you. You cannot let anything get behind you. UGA's pass defense is 27th in the nation, so which is a pretty good group. Like, they've done a pretty solid job as a group. There's been some struggles here and there with giving up some explosive plays, whether it be, like I said, like the one play of Florida. Mississippi State had some success, the Alabama game, but like in the Texas game, nothing. You're hoping, like Kentucky, they didn't allow anything. Auburn, they didn't really allow anything. Clemson, they didn't. So you're hoping that you can kind of replicate something like that into Saturday at 3:30. If you're Ole Miss, protecting Jackson Dart better be mission number one. They are 76 in sacks allowed. They are giving up about 2 a game. In the 2 losses they have this season, they have allowed 10 sacks. That was to Kentucky and LSU. This is a Georgia defense that is 29th in team sacks. They're averaging about 2.5 a game. So they're getting after the quarterback. Whether it's not all the time, but they're getting after the quarterback. And if you were letting Kentucky and LSU get after you, what are we going to do when Michael Williams and Jalen Walker, and you have Christian Miller and Chaz Chambliss coming after you with Warren Britson, even you have CJ Allen, Damon Wilson. What are we going to be doing? How is this offensive line going to hold up? Because I watched the LSU game, watched the Kentucky game. They did not hold up well at all. Now, they were able to win. They were able to neutralize the South Carolina defensive line. That is one of the better game-wrecking units in the country. But they still have had trouble all year at keeping Dart protected. And so it's going to be a massive issue. If they cannot protect Jackson Dart, it's going to be similar to how the Texas game went. You're going to have no time to get any of the explosive deep shots down the field that you want to do. And it's going to push you back into 3rd and longs, where now you're just letting those pass rushers pin their ears back, and it's going to be kind of like a replicate of what happened last year, because that's what happened last year. And so also getting pressure on Beck. We talked about how Carson Beck can't have the stupid mistakes turning the football over. Well, if this very, very good Ole Miss pass rush unit is going to get after him, it's going to be a good day for Ole Miss. Georgia is top 10 in pressure rate allowed, which means they're not giving up a whole lot. They've been very good at keeping Beck protected. Now, they've had some flaws, primarily from that right side of the line, but, I mean, they're done a pretty good job. Now, this will be probably their toughest assignment yet this year. I mean, they went up against a pretty solid Texas unit, but it's not a pass rush. Texas is not the pass rush that Ole Miss is. Ole Miss, in the last 2 games, has 18 sacks. 18 sacks in the last 2 games. They had 10 against Oklahoma. They had 8 against Arkansas. I'm going to run through a couple of their pass rushers here. Their linebacker, Centarian Perkins, has 9 sacks. Jared Ivey has 6 sacks. J.J. McGee has 2.5. Princely Umanmielen has 7.5 sacks. And Walter Nolan, 3 sacks. So they're outstanding, exceptional at getting after the quarterback. There's a reason they're 2nd in the nation in sacks, because they do a hell of a job at just beating whoever's in front of them and just taking over the game. And if they do that, you're going to speed the clock up. That whatever Beck's internal clock has been right now, you're going to speed it up even more. And if you get him under pressure, so far it's shown this year that he's been very vulnerable and very careless with the football. Now, as far as prediction goes, I still think that Georgia's going to win this game. And my thought process is because Lane Kiffin has yet to show that he has proven to me that he can win a game like this. He has not shown me that yet. And I just think that what you saw last week with the Florida game possibly was more of just a, nonchalant. You're expecting to win that game, maybe not focusing as much, even though I was surprised because of a rivalry game like that. You should be up and ready to roll. But again, they came out of the Mississippi State game looking like a little careless, like what's going on. And then you had the Texas game. You had to go to Texas, and, it's like everyone's kind of expecting Texas to kind of dominate in the game. Same thing here. You have an Ole Miss team coming in, just beating the brakes off of Arkansas and Oklahoma the week prior. And you have a Georgia team that just didn't look very good but they got the win against Florida. But I think that Georgia's going to be ready to roll in this one. This 2-game stretch for Georgia is going to determine their season. And I think Kirby Smart knows that. I think this team knows that. Even if Beck throws a pick or two, I still think that they're going to be able to do enough offensively and limit the deep shots enough to where they get a win. I like Georgia to win this one 38-28. I think it's a dominant dog performance. I think Georgia's going to cover that line, and I expect Georgia to roll. I think this is a big-time game. I think they will not be looking ahead to the Tennessee game. This is a massive game. But vice versa, Ole Miss needs this game to stay alive, keep their season alive for any hope of the playoff. They lose this one, they're done for the playoff. 3 losses with no real signature wins for Ole Miss is not going to get them in. So both teams have a lot to play for because Georgia right now sitting at the top of the SEC standings needs this to kind of continue their path to clinching, to getting their spot in Atlanta. Because after this game, they have the Tennessee game, and that's it for SEC play for them. So if they can get this one under lockdown, it'll be very good for them in the, looking ahead here, the SEC title game picture. But I like them to win this one. I do. I'm cautiously optimistic in Georgia winning this one, more so than I was with the Texas game. I thought Texas was going to win the game outright. I thought Georgia would cover, but I thought Texas would win. And even more more optimistic than I was with the Florida game. So Georgia's going to win that one, and I'm going to take a drink of this energy drink that I have. Ooh. Wash that down here. Excuse me. All right, moving on. We have a Big 12 game to talk about before we bounce back to the SEC. Number 20, Colorado, heading to Lubbock, Texas, to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Colorado currently a 3.5-point favorite, over under 62.5. And this is a big conference game in the Big 12 race. Currently, Colorado sits at 3rd in the Big 12. They have 1 conference loss. Texas Tech is 5th right now with 2 conference losses. Both of them each have 4 wins in the conference. So this is a big-time game. Colorado had a lot of help last week with Iowa State and Kansas State losing. So now they only have, I think Iowa State and BYU are still ahead of them. So if they can continue to win, and let's say BYU or Iowa State slips up again, Colorado is going to be right there in the thick of things. I mean, Colorado is right there in the thick of things for the playoff. Who would be thinking we'd be saying that in November? I wouldn't be. I thought this was, to be fair, I did think this was maybe like a 6 or 7 win team. But heck, they can be going for their 7th win right here on Saturday. I like Colorado a lot in this game. But if you're Texas Tech, you're going to need to find a way to stop Colorado in the passing game because Colorado is 8th in passing offense. Shedeur Sanders is 3rd in FBS and completion percentage. And they have a guy named Travis Hunter who's 10th in receptions. It's not just Travis Hunter, though. They have Jimmy Horn, Will Shepard, Jonte Wester. They have a lot of good pieces around Shedeur Sanders that have had great success all year. And Texas Tech, unfortunately, ranks 132nd in passing yards allowed. They're giving up over 300 yards a game. That's a recipe for disaster because Colorado is a pass-first offense. They have run the ball a little bit better in the last few weeks, but they're still not having any great success running the football at all. So if you're terrible against the pass and you're going against one of the best passing offenses, you're going to have to find a way to create turnovers. You're going to have to find a way to limit explosive plays because at this point, you're going to give up a bunch of explosive plays. So can you just limit that is going to be the big question. If you're Colorado, you need to find a way to slow down Taj Brooks. Taj Brooks has been a really good season running the football for the Red Raiders. He is 6th in rushing yards on FBS. He has over 1,000 yards rushing. He has 11 touchdowns. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry. And Colorado is 79th in rush defense, which is a lot better than they were last year. Don't get me wrong, but they're still very susceptible to giving up big plays through the run game. And if you're Texas Tech, you got to be able to find a way to run the football effectively enough because you're going to have to play keep that offense off the field. And then you've got to be able to score touchdowns. If you're in the red zone, you cannot be settling for field goals. It's got to be touchdowns if you're Texas Tech. Slowing the game down will be a massive thing for Texas Tech also. And Baron Morton's going to have a big game. He has over 2,300 yards passing. He's had a really good season, actually. 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country. And Colorado's 50th in pass defense. But I could see a path where it's a high-scoring game. I just don't see a path where Texas Tech wins this one. Maybe they catch Colorado sleeping a little bit, or just catch them, Texas Tech jumps out early and just gets that crowd really going and kind of stuns Colorado some, where they just never recover. But Colorado's been pretty solid on the road this year. Really big wins at UCF and at Arizona. That's the other one. So they've definitely shown that they don't care where the matchup is, because when they have an offense that's really good like that, I think and the defense has played so much better this year than they were last year. I think they don't really care. So I like Colorado to win this one. Also by 10, kind of how the Georgia game goes. 37-27. I'd like this game. Could be a closer game, but Colorado's going to pull ahead late. Shows shifting back to the SEC, though. South Carolina at Vanderbilt. How many people are actually going to be paying attention to this one? It's on SEC Network. It's a 4:00 game. South Carolina is a 3.5-point favorite. Over-under is at 45.5. How many people are going to be watching this one? I could be, watching this one in the sense where, maybe Georgia's dominating or Ole Miss is dominating, and you're kind of just maybe which other game's on, and you go to this game, you're like, hold on, we got ourselves a ball game here, and you have two teams that are right there in the thick of things as far as just trying to continue to improve each and every week. South Carolina is looking for bowl eligibility here, 5-3 on the year. They're trying to get that 6th win. Vanderbilt looking to get their 7th win here. And both are looking to improve off of last week's big-time wins. So this is one of the sneakier matchups of the weekend, in my opinion. Now, keys to the game, though, which team's going to be able to contain the other quarterback? These are two very good running quarterbacks between Lenore Sellers and Diego Pavia. Which team's going to be able to stop? Diego Pavia is the leading rusher for Vanderbilt on the year. He has 146 carries, 563 yards, and 4 touchdowns, Lenore Sellers, 99 carries, 353 yards, and I believe that says 4 touchdowns as well. It could be 9. I believe it says 4 right here. I can't really. Yeah, it's 4. Sorry. Now, if you're Vanderbilt, though, this is going to be the toughest defensive line you've faced all year. In all respect to Alabama or, Auburn or who else they play, Missouri. This is going to be the biggest best defensive line they're going to play all year with, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, Tonka Hemingway, Debo Williams, Demetrius Knight, Nick Emenwari. Like this D-line and this D-line and linebacker group is going to show up ready to roll. It's going to be important for South Carolina. They're going to have someone that's going to be that spy who's going to contain Pavia from not going out. RPO game is what Vanderbilt loves to do. So if South Carolina can stay contained, don't miss their assignment, and have a guy spying on Pavia, I'm very interested to see how Vanderbilt is going to be able to respond to that, because they were able to hold Jalen Milroe to 18 carries for 36 yards by really just saying, listen, we're going to send our edge guys, wide to the perimeter and pretty much force you back into the field of play where you're not going to be able to break contain on the outside and just rush all over us. So, and that's what Vanderbilt wants to do. They've had really good success at doing it all year, but they've also had really good success at getting you out of assignment to where now they can take advantage of that. It's going to be a really nice, kind of, a game of chess here with the South Carolina defense, Vanderbilt offense, because, Vanderbilt's going to want to do one thing, but South Carolina is also going to want to just kind of overwhelm you. And as far as just running the ball as a whole, I lean South Carolina in this one. I think the running game between Sellers and Rocket Sanders is much better than Vanderbilt. Rocket Sanders is his 570 yards on the season. He's averaging almost 5 yards a carry, and he has 8 touchdowns. Monster game last week. He's had a couple monster games. LSU and the A&M game. Big-time wins. Big-time games for him. Vanderbilt, Cedric Alexander's had a decent year himself. He has 440 yards, averaging just under 4 yards a carry, though. So, it's going to be a little more tougher sledding, I think. And if South Carolina can start to overwhelm Vanderbilt a little bit, and South Carolina has the same success, just operating offensively, just efficient offensively, going down the field and scoring points. It's going to be tough for Vanderbilt to stop. Vanderbilt defensively is going to have to find a way to drag Lenore Sellers down. A&M had 25 missed tackles last week against this team. If Vanderbilt does the same thing, it's going to be another long day for Vanderbilt defense, and South Carolina is going to be able to put points up at will. And for that reason, I like South Carolina to win this one. I think this is a close game. I think it's a 27-23 South Carolina win, which means that number right there gets hit. So I think that it's going to be one of the bigger crowds you're going to see Vanderbilt-wise. But I like South Carolina to win. I think their momentum right now is just – they've been a solid group all year, and it's just been a couple tough losses have really kind of derailed them a little bit. But if you change the outcome of a couple plays, some poor officiating, like this is a team contending for a playoff spot right now, which is wild to say for some of these teams in the country this year, but South Carolina being one of them. So I like the mojo they're rolling with a little bit more, even though Vanderbilt's had a hell of a season and is continuing to have a hell of a season. Give me the Gamecocks. And with that being said, we're going to be heading into around the country now, where again, we're getting in our plane. We're going to be perusing around. What are the bigger non-headlining games that we need to be keeping an eye on? Because again, what if we're just strolling through the channels, trying to find a good game, and then all of a sudden you maybe look at your phone to help out with that, and you see Miami Georgia Tech's a game. Let's get there. UCF at Arizona State. Here we go. So we're gonna get into that. Starting right now with Miami, number 4 Miami at Georgia Tech this week. We'll see how the Ramblin' Wreck does with the explosive Hurricanes offense. Florida is at number 5 Texas this week. Quarterback DJ Lagway has not been ruled out. We're going to see what the injury report says tonight when it comes out. Eugene Wilson is out for the year. Another big blow for the Gator offense. He had hip surgery. So remember, he missed the Georgia game after playing in the Kentucky game. So there was some speculations about maybe why he was missing, but now obviously hip surgery, he's out for the year. So we're going to see if Lagway can't go. It's going to be Aiden Warner again, who is the third string quarterback, but nothing's been revealed to this moment. And regardless, though, I think Texas is going to dominate in that one. Minnesota's at Rutgers. Don't look now. The Golden Gophers are looking for their 5th straight win. And it's been a very good bounce-back season for PJ Fleck and this Golden Gopher group, and it's good for Minnesota. Minnesota had that one big run in 2019, and they haven't been really the same since. So to see them kind of bounce back like this, good for them. Michigan's at number 8, Indiana. Indiana seeking their first 10-0 start in program history. They already made history last week, going 9-0 for the first time. So if they're looking to continue to make history, going 10-0, playing at home. Iowa State, number 17, Iowa State at Kansas. Iowa State's only a 3-point favorite. Oh, excuse me. So maybe they know something that Vegas knows something that we don't. I still like Iowa State in that one. Clemson, number 23, Clemson at Virginia Tech. This game lost a lot of luster, what could have been. Unfortunately, both teams have just kind of been stumbling around here and there all year round. So, but definitely it's a gut check type game for Clemson after what happened last week. Now you got to go on the road in a hostile crowd. That Lane Stadium is. Virginia Tech looking for their first win against Clemson in a long time. So we'll see if they can get that done. Number 25, Army is at North Texas. The Black Knights, the only other group of 5 ranked team outside of Boise State. Bryson Daly is questionable still. They're hoping they get him back this weekend. So Army is 5.5-point favorite right now. I still like Army to win. They're trying to stay alive. They have to stay unbeaten to keep their season. For any playoff aspiration wise, they have to keep staying undefeated. They're also sitting atop right now the American. Tulane, I think they have Temple this week. So Tulane is the second team right there. Both teams have been cruising along in the American. Mississippi State is at Tennessee. Tennessee has Georgia next week on Saturday night in Athens. So the Vols looking let's see if they get caught looking ahead. Mississippi State can catch them right there. Mississippi State is a 24-point underdog in this game. And I think Mississippi State's going to cover that number. I think Tennessee's first half struggles are a big part of that. Also, the fact that you can maybe catch them in a look-ahead spot for sure. UCF's at Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham and this Arizona State group looking for their 7th win of the season. Florida State's heading to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's going to do some unspeakably terrible things to Florida State this weekend. And Florida State will probably be seeing their not ninth straight loss. There's their 9th loss this season. Oklahoma at 24th ranked somehow, some way. Missouri, don't know the status right now. Brady Cook, we'll see if he's ready to go. If not, it'll be Drew Pine's game. Washington at number 6 Penn State. This game is the whiteout game for Penn State, and it's on Peacock. So if you're looking to watch the whiteout this year, better get that on-demand game going. Nevada is at number 12 Boise State. And Ashton Denty on this week's episode of how many yards he's going to rush for. Well, Nevada's ranked 80th in rush defense, so I think he might have pretty good success as he looks to stay in the Heisman race. And then finally, number 9 BYU is at Utah. It is the Holy War game. Obviously, these two in-state rivals do not like each other very much, and it's the first time they'll be playing since 2021 when BYU beat Utah. So, as we wrap up the episode here, which is week 11 preview, make sure you guys are subscribing to the podcast because that is the only way we continue to grow the show. Make sure you guys are viewing the show too. Viewership's been a little lackluster lately, so make sure we're doing that. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here and share the podcast as well. All right, we're going to round out today's episode with some best bets. Obviously, you can tell on the screen, 27, 16, and 1. We have been very good this year. We had 5 straight winning weeks before last week. So make sure, don't abandon the ship yet. We're going to bounce back. We're going to bounce back in a big way this week. I love the board. I love the picks that we have. You got Mississippi State plus 24, LSU plus 3. I like BYU money line. Georgia minus 2.5, Colorado minus 3, Army minus 5.5, and South Carolina minus 3.5. So take those picks, do what you want with them. Fade them if you want, but don't come running back when these all hit. Just saying. So we're going to definitely have a bounce back week. I'm confident in that. And I'm confident that you guys are going to watch, love the episode, subscribe, and do what you guys usually do. So with all that being said, I am Hunter DeLauder. This has been a great and wonderful another episode of College Football Talk. And unfortunately, it does come to an end right now. So make sure you guys are subscribing. Thank you guys for watching so much. And we'll see you next time.